Welcome to Jerks Talk Games, a podcast where two idiots attempt to make technology work and talk about video games at the same time. My name is Chris Tankersley, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Gary Hawken.
Hello, Internet.
Hi, Gary. Well, we finally managed to sit down, and we will be recording what is now episode 19.
Wow.
I was going through my Facebook time hop, and we have been doing this for over a long time.
Yeah, 19 episodes. I didn't think we would actually manage to get one out. You know, this year. This is is it April already, and we haven't had an episode out in 2018, which is pretty bad. That is due entirely down to my bad. I haven't been very well, and I've changed jobs, and everything's been a kerfuffle, let's just say. So, yeah, it's all good.
It's all your fault.
We are absolutely 100% committed to continuing this. It's just real life totally intervened in me in particular. In all fairness to you, Chris, you've sat down ready to record a few times, and I've had to call off at short notice, so I do apologize for that. But
it's really hard getting up at 8 a.m. I like to sleep till 9:30. That's I need to get all of my beauty sleep.
Well, if I'd known I made you wake up earlier, I would have done it even more often, to be honest. So it's all good. It's all good.
Well,
Sweet.
With this being episode 19, we have mentioned a couple times in our chat, we are going to talk about roguelikes. Mostly roguelikes, because Rogue itself is a very old and nobody ever plays that game anymore. But yeah, roguelikes are all the rage now. There's a ton of indie games that are out now that are roguelike or, roguelite in a lot of cases. But roguelikes are one of the oldest styles of video games that we have.
Absolutely. So I am guilty of not knowing that the term roguelike came from the term rogue, even though I am 100% aware of the game Rogue from 1980. I know the game. It never clicked until we had notes for this show. We do have notes, by the way. People think we just ramble on incoherently. There are notes. But yeah, when I looked at the notes that you've written when I saw Rogue 99, I was like, oh, Roguelike. I get it now. But it's all good, right? It's all good.
It's a good thing you're pretty, Gary.
Thanks.
Yeah. So they've been around a really long time. Rogue wasn't the first roguelike game. I guess that distinction goes to a game called Beneath Apple Manor, which came out on a whole host of things, I guess.
It's not so catchy, though, is it? Beneath Apple Manor, I think roguelike is a better term.
And this is not a game I've played, but hey, cool. It was on a bunch of different platforms, but I guess it's much like what we would think a basic roguelike is. But the one everybody fondly remembers is, well, I say fondly, I don't know how many people watching this have ever actually played Rogue, is the actual game called Rogue from 1980.
Yep. A decent game for its time.
Yeah.
For sure.
it's one of those old mainframey type games. So it's one of those where you're going to have to actually log in, get time on a machine to log into some mainframe that's actually using it, and go in and play. It did get ported to a ton of other systems. So it's on the Amiga, it's on the ZX Spectrum, it's on the Atari, Commodore 64. So it got ported to a lot of different things, but it sets up a lot of the traditional roguelike things that persisted for a really, really long time. One of them being everything is all ASCII text. So the entire screen is drawn with ASCII characters. So you really have to use your imagination and understand that the little @ symbol is your guy.
Yeah.
and you have to pretend I know what that person looks like. That W that's coming toward me is probably some foul winged beast. Um, but yeah, it's amazing how much they can do with just those small screens and then ASCII characters.
So,
That
sorry, Chris, go.
I would say that frees up a lot of memory and resources that they could put toward logic in the game as opposed to having to go through and design sprites and do all of that. It also makes it a lot more portable because a lot of systems didn't have sprite engines, which is weird to think about now, but it was really hard to do sprites on some of these older computers, especially like the TRS-80.
So for me, the amazing thing to think that this was made in 1980 and it was run on, I would guess most people who played it in like university sort of mainframes or other places where you'd have access to beefy computers.
Yep.
The amazing
Yeah,
thing for me is
it came up with the rise of Unix.
it's is that so there's a few characteristics that Rogue had that typically the typical roguelike games will have now. So when we talk about roguelike games, it's the mechanics that Rogue had that these new games share. So for me, like one of the main things that a roguelike has is procedurally generated dungeons or procedurally generated levels. Doesn't necessarily have to be a dungeon, of course. That's what Rogue had. It's amazing to think that in 1980 on these NAX systems, they were having procedurally generated dungeons. That's kind of cool, right? To think that that goes all the way back to that time. So, yeah, that's really cool. So, I mean, it's probably worth us quickly taking a look at what I guess people think considers making something roguelike. So, yeah, procedurally generated levels, I'd say that's like a must for it to be a roguelike.
Yeah, because I think Rogue persisted quite a while, but then you ended up with, I think probably the one most people think about when they think about roguelites is the NetHack game, which is based off Hack from that came out a little bit after Rogue. But you end up with this system where it's more like a mud where you have roving mobs of things that are just moving around the levels. The AI, some of them are very aggressive, some of them are not. But you have them roaming around these procedurally generated levels. And the point of a lot of these old games was to get down to like a NetHack, you're trying to retrieve an amulet. So you're going down these levels deeper, deeper, deeper. The idea is your character's getting stronger as you go. You're picking up more equipment and better equipment as you go. But it does introduce the theme of permadeath.
Yeah.
So your character will more than likely die. Getting to the end game is really, really super hard.
So, yeah, I think permadeath is another for me. Like, there's three, there's three characteristics of a roguelike that I think are set in stone, and then there's a few other little ones that most do, but I don't think is necessarily needed. And I think permadeath is so procedurally generated levels definitely one, and then permadeath definitely two. So the idea is, and that sounds like really scary if you've never played one, but the idea is that the game has high replayability because of the procedurally generated levels. Yes. No two times you play the game will be the same because the levels are randomly rolled, so to speak. So you die, when you die, but then you just go again because the game's always going to be slightly different every time you play it.
Yeah, and you just have to get over the hump of, sometimes you spend a couple hours with a character knowing they're going to die. You don't get to go back and get the corpse and loot them like you can in some games. Like I'm playing Nier Automata right now. So if you die, you can go back to your corpse and pick up some of the things that you lost. You do the same thing in Dark Souls.
Yep.
In most traditional roguelikes, you die, the universe resets. Your previous playthrough has no impact usually on what your current playthrough has. That's changed a little bit nowadays with some more unlockable type roguelikes.
Yeah, I think sorry mate, the modern roguelikes typically, and this is probably the third thing that wasn't in the original Rogue, but roguelikes typically have a a way that you, even though death is permanent, the character gets slightly more powerful every time you do a
Hmm.
run, so that the easy levels of the dungeon, let's just say, become a little bit easier because you've powered up a little bit, even though you died. So while permadeath is permadeath, death is permanent. Maybe you level up between dungeon runs so you can put a few points into having a bit more health or a bit more attack speed. The classic for me, the modern classic for me that I absolutely love is Rogue Legacy. I can play something in a touch. Maybe I'll play Slay the Spire, which is probably suited to streaming a bit more. Maybe a bit of Rogue Legacy, but it's just, yeah, the kind of, it's a cycle of, you play the game, you die, you have a tiny bit of improvement, and then you play the game again, and then you just keep doing it and doing it until you beat the dungeon
Hmm.
or you get bored. So really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, and then that I think is the spin that most modern roguelikes have put on the genre, is that idea of you're you're going to grind through as a very very weak thing
Yeah.
until you can unlock a lot of stuff, and then you have a lot of customization that you can do for what you want to do. I think one of the games that does this best is FTL. So
Yeah.
the FTL is a space based
Faster than light. Yeah.
roguelike. Yep, it's FTL, faster than light. You The idea is you're trying to outrun a massive ship that's trying to come and destroy you. So you're or a fleet of ships that are trying to come get you, and you're trying to take out their big ship. So you go through these procedurally generated levels, going from planet to planet. All of the enemies are randomly generated, but as you go through the game, you'll pick up different ships. Some of them have different weapon loadouts from the beginning, so some are more powerful than others. Some of them have different room layouts that give you different advantages. So I think that was probably the first one for me that made me realize, like, I've played a lot of NetHack over time, but the ability to grow a little bit makes that grind kind of worth it. Knowing that if I keep playing the game, I'll discover something new, and I'll be able to get something that's stronger. And especially with some of the updates they put out right before they stopped working on the game a couple of years ago, you can end up with some really nice loadouts
Yeah.
just by playing through the game and putting 10, 15 hours into it.
So yeah, I mean, we can talk about uh, the rest, the rest of the kind of classics, but I guess we've covered them with Rogue, Hack, and NetHack. I never really played Hack and NetHack. Were around when I was a kid, which is telling of how old I am. Particularly NetHack. When I was in university, there were a lot of people who played a bit of NetHack um, because it was a conducive atmosphere. We had the mechanics to play NetHack quite easily in universities, whereby home networks weren't quite as prolific as
Mm-hmm.
they are now. So it was kind of the perfect thing to do, and you could play NetHack on pretty much any machine, right? You could play it on any kind of dumb terminal, or you could play it on one of the Windows machines if they had them. So yeah, that was quite popular. But I guess I'm completely no knowledge of roguelikes until I started playing Rogue Legacy, which would have been 5 years ago, I'd like to think. Maybe a bit longer. I bought it when it first came out on the recommendation of a friend I was working with in a company called AdSpruce. Ryan Davis, actually, the very nice guy who donated his chiptune audio for our theme tune, was the guy who turned me on to Rogue Legacy. And I just totally didn't get it when I first played it. I was like, oh, I go into the dungeon, oh, I've died, and then I get to spend my money. But then when I go back into the dungeon, I lose all my money. How the hell does this work? And of course, the point is that you have to spend your money in the meta game to make yourself stronger for
Yeah.
the actual playing of the dungeon. It's a great game. I think it's something ridiculous, like under $5 these days. It's so cheap.
Um, yeah, as
It's
of the time of
so
recording,
cheap.
I think it's $3 on Steam.
So it's a
So
pixelated
you should pick it
side
up if you're
platform.
interested in
Yeah,
roguelikes.
I mean,
Rogue Legacy is another one of those. It's really nice to get into and play. The point of that game, which is a little bit of a twist, is every character that you get has some sort of disadvantage most of the time, because and you're playing through the legacy of an entire family. So every character that you play is a new character in that family, but they sometimes get things like gigantism, which makes your character larger. One is hemophilia, I think, which makes you take more damage. So there's a lot of these weird things that each character gets that changes the gameplay each time, which and it's random. The only thing you can influence is by gaining money, you can get nice job falling in the spikes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to die on purpose so that I can show the character
Yeah.
selection screen. It's fine.
You can you take your money and you use that to upgrade your castle, which then in turn lets you get more powerful weapons and armor and spells. So here we have an example of Sir Wizarl. He's a barbarian king. He had the remember things with more extreme clarity. So I think your
I think that affects your map. I think you can you can remember the dungeon layout perfectly, so the map is more vivid.
He's insane, but he does have a spell called Blade Wall, which is different than what someone else would have. So Jacoby has no foot pulse, which means he can walk on spikes, if I remember correctly.
He doesn't trigger the the floor spikes. Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't trigger the four spikes. He has to clear everything in the house to get his magic points back. And then he throws a chakram, which is a spinny blade thingy. But so each time you go through the game, you get to pick one of these. I think it's 3 people, and start off. They have their own unique powers. You can go in, level up. So he had 110 gold left over from the last run. He can level stuff up. You've got a weapon merchant, another merchant, or a spell merchant that you can go through, play. But each time the castle changes. So there's a story plot where the point of this castle is it constantly changes. So that explains why the levels are random every single time. But you go in, you play a completely different map. You can pay to resume a map, but I think it's pretty costly. Like one of the guys will let you reuse the last dungeon that you were in.
Yeah, which is good because there are end of level bosses. So like typically what you'll do is you'll do a run and then you'll do another run and you'll do another run and you'll buy better weapons and slightly better loadouts, and maybe you get the addition to dash twice instead of once to make yourself stronger, and then you'll attempt to kill the boss. And if you wanted to attempt to kill the boss, you don't really want to have to go through the entire level again, procedurally generated, so you can use the shortcut. You can tell the guy, lock this dungeon in place for me and I'll take the 50% gold reduction, and then you can just go and try and kill the boss, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
It's a really cool game, actually, and as I say, it's so cheap that I can only recommend picking that up because it's super cheap. I think it's like $3 or something.
It's on just about everything, because I have it on. I first played it on PS Vita because it was part of PS Plus like years ago. But it's on PS4, it's on Xbox, it's on computer. I would not be surprised if there is there a mobile version?
I don't think so, but
there should be. I think it's coming out for Switch. Am I correct on that?
I don't think so. I think they're releasing their newer game, which is called something Furies.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of. So I was thinking they were making something for Switch. Yeah. If it was on Switch, that would be freaking amazing.
But the amazing thing is, so Ross Tuck in our Slack, which you can come and join if you'd like to chat with us, told me about Pixel Dungeon, which is a mobile roguelike, which is really cool, except it kept crashing for me, so I didn't think it was really cool. But Ross said that it's a super game, and I agree. It's a really good example of a mobile roguelike. Really worth a go. Interestingly, there have been AAA releases which could consider themselves as roguelike. Probably Diablo 3 is maybe roguelike.
I mean, most of the Diablo games are the dungeons are procedurally generated. Um, Death plays a very big part of the game. Um, you're getting randomized loot like you do in a lot of roguelikes. I am not sure if I really would consider it a real roguelike. I think it has some random elements, and you definitely do have to pray to the RNG gods. But I don't know if I'd really consider it a roguelike. Do you?
No, because of the lack of permadeath. I think that's the one thing that doesn't make it a roguelike for me. Um, Procedurally generated levels tick. Metagame, the kind of the leveling up between dungeon runs tick, but the permadeath for me, you don't start again when you in Diablo. You still have your character who's a level 47 necromancer with all of the loot from the
Right.
last dungeon run. So I don't think it's close, but no cigar. But if you're struggling to
Yeah.
understand roguelikes, I think that's a good example. I don't think there's been like a AAA pure roguelike yet. It does seem to be the realms of the indies at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I think the closest. Well, I don't know if Has Been Hero. The Has Been Heroes, I feel like was more of a non-indie game, but not quite a AAA game. But yeah, roguelikes I think really shine in the indie space. So because a lot of the really good ones are indie games. Um, Slay the Spire I think is the newest, most popular one that has come out. Uh, which
Yep.
I think Gary's going to play here
I
now.
am just cranking the volume down so that it doesn't blast people's minds. But yeah, so this is early access. We all know my amazing rants on early access. Like, let's not go there and have me moaning about that again for the 20th time. But yeah, this is Slay the Spire. So this is a weird card based roguelike. So we just get to pick a character. So I start this game every single time I play with nothing from the last game. You can only unlock more cards as you play, and depending on how well I've done last time, I get to pick like a little perk at the beginning of the game, which is great. So this isn't going to be great fun for the podcast unless I just go for it and we still talk. So then this is it has the procedurally generated dungeon part. So, it's typical, but then you just get cards to play. And the more things that you kill, the you get to then pick random cards and random perks, and it's all randomized. And then should you die, which is inevitable in these games, well, you could win or die, because
you might win.
replayability in all roguelikes
You
is
might
important.
you might get to the end and get the amulet. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But it's it's a pretty cool game. I'm just skipping enemy turns if you're on watching on the stream, just so that I can die to show that you just go straight back. Die into these two little things is going to be harder than anything. So let's just.
I've not played Slay the Spire. So as opposed to getting randomized loot, you just get randomized cards for each run.
So this now that once I win a round, I get my rewards, which will be randomized, and then I get to pick a random card, and then there are some rare cards that help you to build a deck just for this run. This is the interesting thing: is you're not building a deck for for future games. So this isn't like Hearthstone or like Magic the Gathering or typical CCJ type games where you try and build the deck as much as you can. You're literally only building a deck for this run. So you may think, oh, do you know what? I haven't done a defensive deck for ages. Let's do a defensive deck this run because I've managed to get Impervious, which is a rare card that gives me a lot of block. Oh, that means I should probably build my block around defense this time. And you can just experiment with how you play the game, and that's what I really like about it. Will a poison plus glass cannon build actually work? Let's try that out. And that's kind of the attraction of the game, really, is you're not invested in the runs in as much as it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. The fun can be in the try-in. I think that's kind of the secret of why roguelikes are so popular, is that kind of mentality. Well, the run's a throwaway anyway, so let's try something different this time.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one I'm not big on the deck building games. Like I don't like that kind of mechanic. Um, but I've seen quite a few people play Slay the Spire, and it definitely seems like one of the most popular roguelikes out there. And I mean, it ticks all the boxes. You've got the permadeath mechanic, you've got the randomized loot mechanic with the cards. Um, it does add in, instead of you having dungeons, you get a map that you can follow.
Yeah, but the map is
which
random each time, and you've
yeah,
got
the map is
bosses
random
in
each time,
it.
so
You've got fires,
yeah,
because you can only rest at fires. So my health will never. I'll never heal unless I choose to heal on the map. So that's the trick here, is that these fights are really difficult because your health never goes up unless you choose to heal somehow. So that's the tricky part.
Yeah. So I mean, it seems like a pretty decent game. I just personally don't like the deck based games, just because I feel like it's dealing with cards is kind of annoying. But the mechanics in this one may be much better than some of the other ones I've played. I should actually probably sit down and actually play.
So hang on a second.
At some point.
Magic the Gathering nerd Chris Tankersley is saying he doesn't like deck building games. I don't
like the deck building games where you're building the deck on the fly.
Yeah, I get you.
Based on randomized loot that you're getting. So playing Hearthstone or Magic or things like that, you get a chance to build. You know what's going into the deck before you start the game off. It's I kind of don't like. I like but don't like drafts in Magic the Gathering for the same reason.
I get you.
Because I want to build it. I know how I like to play, and getting randomized cards makes that hard sometimes. So like doing a draft in Magic the Gathering, for those that don't know what it is every person opens up a pack, like a regular pack of cards, and you pick a card out of that you want to keep, and then you pass it, and then you get the next deck, which now has one less card in it because someone's taken it. So you take something out of that, pass it. So you're trying to build the best thing possible out of that, while also trying to play the game itself. So I've never really liked that mechanic. So maybe Slay the Spire offsets some of that stuff.
I think it's a card roguelike, and that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And it definitely does. The element of luck is immense, but you don't have to take cards, and there's a skill involved in knowing when to drop cards as well as take cards. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Having never really played any proper card building games, like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone or anything like that, then I don't know how this compares. I just know that I've never taken to a deck building game, but I've really, really enjoyed this. I've played a lot of hours of this game, which is kind of sad, I guess, but I really, really like it. So typically, like, you may want to get rid of one of the start-in cards because they become poor later on. Mm-hmm. There's the decision to be made. I've only got 30 health. Do I actually want to take this random path here and take the boss on? It's really, really good fun. And of course, if I die, who cares?
Yeah, it's who defends. Yeah. But I mean, that's part of the point of a roguelike is, death is not the end of the game. So any roguelike, I think, wants you to take those risks that you might not take in a traditional game where you're going to be out 30 minutes or you've got to go back through and redo a section of a dungeon. So I think it does help quite a bit with being like, I'm right on that cusp. I might be able to win this battle. Let's do it anyway. Because worst case, I've lost this run, but that doesn't ruin the game completely for me.
But on the other hand, runs can take like an hour. These runs.
Yeah.
And in some roguelikes, the runs can take multiple hours. Let's not, just because they're roguelike, it doesn't mean that each time you fight, it's a trivial amount of time per times you attack the dungeon. Some of them have like really, really long time. So it's pretty cool a concept. I'm intrigued. There are so many roguelikes out by indie developers that it's impossible for me to for me to mention them all. Other games that I've played very similar to Rogue Legacy vein is Gungeon.
Mhm.
Dungreed. I apologize, which is a Korean-based small indie developer, but the game is absolutely amazing.
Mhm.
That's definitely worth it. It's a bit of a twist on Rogue Legacy. But yeah, Enter the Dungeon, which is like a gun. Enter the Gungeon, which is like a gun-based roguelike, which is fantastic. I've been watching.
Is that the first person one?
No, that's the Tower of Guns, I believe, which is
Okay.
one guy just wrote this. That's cool. Enter the Gungeon is coming out on Switch. It's a twin shooter. So the classic from the last 5 years was Binding of Isaac. Is it called? Is that
Yeah. Hmm.
which is the twin stick, which is the classic sort of roguelike from the kind of, I guess that started the current fad for twin stick roguelikes, which are really popular at the moment.
It's the only twin stick shooter I'll play. I cannot get into any of the other ones. Like Hotline Miami, I really want to like. I I do not like twin stick shooters. It's annoying. The twin stick shooter parts of Near Automata just annoy the crap out of me. But Binding of Isaac, I love playing through that, and it's one of my son's favorite games. He's only 10. I think he's been playing it since he's been 8. Um, which really annoys my wife because there's a lot of stuff in that game that probably an 8-year-old probably shouldn't be
Yeah.
exposed to.
Yeah, it's a little close to the bone
Um,
at points.
but that's one of his favorite games, and I that on the Switch, I think that's probably my favorite roguelike. I mentioned Has Been Heroes, which is a lane has a lane based mechanic. And I guess that's one thing to talk about too. Is a lot of the mechanics, depending on the game, there's different fighting mechanics. So Slay the Spire is pretty turn based. So you do all of your damage with your cards, then the enemies attack.
Yeah.
FTL is pseudo real time, so you can pause it, but everything's based on timers. So your weapons all have different timers, like different cooldown timers for how quickly you can attack. Um, Slay the Spire has a lane based mechanic. So you have 3 characters that are on, lanes 1, 2, and 3, and the enemies are coming from the right side of the screen. You're on the left side of the screen, and each character has a cooldown on their abilities. But when they attack the specific lane that they're in. So you have to stage, okay, this enemy's coming through here. He's weak to melee attack, so I need to move my melee gate down to him as an action, let him recharge, then he can attack that whole lane, which is kind of cool. The game's a little, I think, still a little bit rougher on the edges, but that's a pretty decent roguelike. So each time you run through the game, the maps
What was
are
that
different.
called, Chris? Sorry?
Has Been
Has
Heroes.
Been Heroes. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's out on quite a few different platforms. But it's a traditional roguelike. Your maps are randomly generated, so each time you play through it, the path is different. You're picking up different items that you can use to start your characters off slightly stronger. That whole thing. Um, I like Binding of Isaac better for that, but Has Been Heroes is not a bad game if you can pick it up fairly cheap.
Cool. Very, very cool. So, before we sign off, you said you've been playing Near Automaton lately, have you? Is that so?
Yes, I have.
So,
I
aside from
picked that up.
roguelikes, which if you haven't picked it up already, I absolutely love a good roguelike. I really do. So, let us know what your favorite roguelikes are. There's so many of them from the indie genre that it's impossible to play them all. There's a YouTuber called Wanderbots who attempts to do that. If you like to if you'd like to watch any of them, he attempts to play as many as he can. And some days he's got so many, he does something called roguelike roulette, where he just spins a wheel and whatever it stops on, he'll try that game. It's really cool. So yeah, Wanderbots is a great YouTuber and streamer, I think. But yeah, so what have you been playing outside of the roguelike genre?
Mostly I have been playing the last week or so Near Automata. I picked that up for cheap during one of GameStop's sales. Out of that too, I picked up Fractured But Whole. I laugh every time I say that. I picked up the new South Park game because it was cheap, but I haven't played it yet. But really, a lot of it's been Near Automata, and I was playing Monster Hunter World, which I still suck at. but been playing that on and off. But between conference trips and work trips and stuff, like it's been hard, which is why I love the Switch, because then I can just pick up something and play it for 10-15 minutes and go from there.
You timed your finish right. A mouthful of tea.
Thank you I timed that so that you were still drinking.
You're such a pro. I like it. Yeah, we picked up. So there's I've mentioned before. There's a few people I've been playing games with forever, and we picked up Ark Survival Evolved recently. So I've been playing quite a bit of that. So it's
I refuse to give them money.
You refuse to give them money? Any particular reason why?
I refuse to give them money. They release DLC for a game still in early access.
Okay. That is completely and utterly acceptable statement to make, because we've gone here before. Let's not get me on the early access rant again. I've done well today. But, I mean, I bought... Is that game still in early access? It can't be. That must be released now.
No, but when they released their DLC, they still were in early access and had not finished the game.
You know, it's a good game. It's a good game to play co-op. We've got a little server on a friend's, just sitting on a friend's box. And I played that for, 20 hours and then got bored of it. They are still pounding along, taming all the huge dinosaurs and building massive bases. And I'm like, typically me, that was a fun 10 hours. The second 10 hours, why am I playing this? And then I'd install, bored, gone. But I enjoyed it.
Survival games, I don't mind Rust so much as an aggravating experience that it is. But most of the survival games, I think, peter out after quite a while. I really want to try Subnautica, because that looks like that actually has a pretty decent long-term game as part of it, as opposed to just build a big giant base and then do what I don't know. Like a lot of survival games seem to peter out after 5 to 10 hours. I
think Ark's definitely got the longevity if you've got a bit of patience. I just don't have any patience for, like some of the tames. Like if you haven't played Ark, you're thrown onto an island where there's effectively everything. Well, 70% the things that want to kill you and 30% things that are okay and don't want to kill you. And there's like a combination of dinosaurs and made-up dinosaur-esque monsters. So you can tell the devs increasingly ran out of ideas the longer they went on, because the lower level dinosaurs you come across at first are all like Dilophosaurs and Triceratops and all stuff that you will have heard of from the National History Museum. And then the higher up the levels you go, they've just thought, let's just like merge a Triceratops with a lion and call that a dinosaur. Right, let's call it good. You know, they obviously ran out of ideas, but it's really good. It's just you need a lot of patience to play that game. And for me, when I spend like 4 hours of gameplay to tame a monster, a T-Rex, and then log off and then log in the next day, and within 10 minutes my T-Rex dies, I want to throw my computer out the window. So it's perhaps not the best game for me to play. I enjoyed it for like the 20 hours I played it. I have to confess, I did. It's been a lot of fun.
I mean, I tried it a long time ago in one of the free weekends that it was on Steam. It's not a bad game. One of our mutual friends, I think, also plays it. But I'm not big on the survival stuff. Like I said, after about 5 or 10 hours, every single one of those peters out, because most of them don't have a ton of content, I find.
Well, I enjoyed 7 Days to Die. I enjoyed 7 Days to Die, and I enjoyed it, and got to the point where I just didn't feel like there was enough to do in 7 Days to Die. You explore your immediate surroundings, but once you've again, a procedurally generated landscape. Once you've seen one city, you've pretty much seen them all, because it's the same buildings, just put in a different order. And then it becomes really difficult to actually plan what the hell you're going to do to make anything of the game. So I thought Ark would be great. But again, it gets to the point where you just tame stuff just because, once, I want to tame one of them. And once you've tamed one, I want to tame one of them. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to do now? You can always look upwards and go, there's more bigger and badder beasts for me to tame. But once you've sort of tamed your first T-Rex, where do you go from there, really?
What's the point?
Yeah. It's good. It was good. It was worth its money. Let's just put it that way. I paid $15 for it, perhaps, and
Okay,
I don't feel like I wasted my money, so that's all good.
yeah, that's not bad.
Cool. So we finally managed to record another episode in 2018, Chris, and it wasn't as painful as I thought.
No, and we even managed to like do it on Twitch and get all of that stuff set up.
Yeah,
I mean, I spent hours. I spent hours getting it ready for you to just click a couple buttons, but hey.
I think we'll do this again. I think I'd like to kind of try this out and keep going with it, because hopefully this hasn't impacted too much on the podcast edition. If this has impacted a lot on the podcast edition, let us know, because podcast listeners, you are our first priority, and if we do anything that makes the content less interesting for you, then we'll definitely want to remedy that.
Yes, the less editing I have to do, the better.
You do editing? Wow.
I will. I have to cut out that chunk where we went silent for a good minute
sorry.
or so.
Sorry, you didn't miss anything.
It's fine. It's us trying to figure it out. So I guess with that, thank you, Gary, for managing to take time and finally sit down and record this podcast. As always, you can find Gary on Twitter as @GEEH@key. You can find me as @DragonManTank on Twitter and just about everywhere else. And you can find us, the podcast itself, as Jerks Talk Games on Twitter. You can find the website, which has all of our past episodes and all of our show notes, at jerkstalkgames.com. From there, you can also get to our Slack channel, where it's been a little bit quiet lately, but we've also been quiet. So, there's that. But of course, you can find this on if you're watching this on Twitch, we do make this available on YouTube. If you're watching on either of those two video formats, you can find us in just about any podcast provider, iTunes, Google Music. We are on Stitcher now as well. I think we got that at the end of last year. So whatever podcast system you use, go in, download, rate, leave a comment, whatever helps us in every single way. But I guess, again, thank you, Gary, and to everyone else.
Thank you, Chris, and it's a pleasure to see you again.
Yep, and to everybody else, don't forget to save your game.